Actually, it's now good evening. It's now the morning of the day of the demonstration, and I've discovered why you were unable to see my screen shares. And what I'm going to do in this video is to correct that issue. It turned out a couple of drivers, graphic drivers, were not dancing well with each other. So I got them to the same ball and they now work. So let's go back and pull up that slideshow that I wanted everyone to have a chance to go through. So we're going to start the show right here. Now, we've walked through how to actually make this piece, but there are some salient points here that are critically important to actually understanding what constitutes a repair strategy that really reaches out and grabs people's attention and makes it a very saleable and excellent piece. If we look closely at this form, there's a number of things going on. The first thing, if you ask yourself, where does your eye go? Well, your eye is drawn right here. Well, there's a reason for that. That reason is it's the brass against the black. It's the contrast of the black against the beautiful wood tones of the bowl itself. That's a hard maple bowl. So that's part of it, but there's more there. The other thing that's important is you notice that it's raised up. And down at the bottom, there's a small foot that helps bring that more up into the viewer's line of sight. The other thing that's involved here is the bowl form. That is not my normal bowl form. That's flatter. It's straighter. Normally, I have an ogee up here at the top with a thumb rim, but what I have to do is I have to modify the form to fit the repair technique so that this wall is flatter than I would normally have it. But what it does, it brings it up into people's line of sight, which is what we're trying to do. The next part of this is to look at the stitching. Now, the human mind is amazing. It will complete things to what's supposed to be there. So that when I added the stitching to the bowl, people will come up to me and how'd you get that zipper stitched into that wood like that? Well, the answer is, as you know, is it's not stitched. That's actually pyrography that suggests something that the mind completes. That's part of why this grabs people's attention, is they're trying to figure out what they see because it can't really be stitches, but it sure looks like stitches. So how could this be? And by the time they get done with that, they want to take it home, which is what this is all about. So form has been impacted by the repair technique used. That's part of the magic of this piece. All right, now I talked to you about this one. This is, again, the same repair technique. Actually, I showed you this one during the demonstration. But the key here is that there really was a flaw there. And as I corrected the flaw, what I believe happened is I actually made the piece better than it was. This one we've seen, this is the use of copper staples, but you got a couple other things going on here. One thing that you'll notice is that the rim thickness, it's a little thick. Well, there's a reason for that. I have to have glue surface here so that when I put that bowl form back together, I can remount it to the lathe and be safe about what I'm doing. So that sometimes gets important. So again, the technique is impacting the form itself. The next thing you'll notice again is a foot that brings it up into the viewer's eyes. That's critically important to really make these kind of pieces sing. All right, let's see what we got on the next slide. Next slide is by Mike Hosselak. I tell you what, Michael, I really have the greatest regard for him. He has a different level of a different gift than most of us have. He's taken the whole concept of staples and not just used them, but incorporated those into the design of the piece itself. That's really genius work. He's working 3 levels up is the only thing I can say. I mean, that's just, that piece has been improved by that repair. It was excellent to start with, but it's gone to another level as he's gone and used those staples as part of the technique of repairing that crack in that small form. All right, this is by Jean Le Guin. Jean is a master turner down here in my area. And she had a whole series of blanks that had cracks along the rim. Now, if you look closely, you'll begin to see a 4-inch sanding disc. And here's another one of those triangular sanding pads. Okay, but she's a better drawer than I am, quite frankly. So she has some very, very good use of patterns as she's cut out the cracks along the rim. She does not let the cracks stop where she cuts. That's the other part of the magic here. But she's gone 2 steps further. She's gone back and highlighted the cutout by using a contrasting paint color, an acrylic paint color on the rims itself. Now, you know, you may not be a fan of this kind of color in a wood bowl. Some people are more purists. They like the beauty of the wood itself. Nevertheless, what Jean has done here works very well, and some eyes will be attracted to it and want to take it home. And she's gone the next step, and what she's done is she's colored the inside and the outside. So she has a whole concept of what colors go together in a good overall pattern, as well as the form itself. You'll still notice that what's happening here is that form brings it up. It brings it up, which again seems to be a consistency in good repair techniques. The form is impacted. This is Tom Robbins. Tom's is a turner out of, say, Central Ohio Woodturners. Get that right. He's an artist outside of his work in wood. These are some of his pieces which he created after we put on a demonstration, this demonstration in a clinic with his group. Let's go over here to the bowl on the left. Well, he's done that same concept of cutting out the flaws around his bowl. He's used Jean's technique of highlighting that cutout with a contrasting color of paint. He's left the outside the natural wood, which is a walnut, but blackened the inside. But the genius is right here, is he actually suspended that repair technique from where it was, which is really cool. And I think Joel may want to bring that kind of concept into his repair piece from his massive, beautiful wall hanging. The other thing you'll notice is the use of a butterfly right there. Okay, a little bit more subtle detail. Let's go to Tom's next piece, which is over here. Now, one of the other pieces I saw had the same problem. You know, this is where the pith was left in the blank a little bit too much, so you get a crack where the pith runs. So what Tom has done is he's cut out both pith cracks going around. Now, he likes to have wide rims on his pieces, which gives him the ability not to cut on the side, but cut on the flat, which is a whole different concept. And again, he's come back and used a color to improve the visual impact of the piece, where now the outside is black, the inside is the natural wood color, and he's using the yellow on the rim to highlight it. A third piece is down here in the center lower. This is a piece of cherry. Now, quite frankly, of the 3 pieces, I like this one the best. He has an excellent contrast between the natural cherry color, the rich reds of cherry, against a black rim, where he's gone in and addressed the cracks that appear in his blank. All right, Tom, it's just well done. I had suggested to Tom to send some of those people on into the American Woodturner for publication, and they picked up some of his pieces. Just excellent, excellent work. This is one of my pieces. Goes back to 2008, if you'd believe. And I call it a wrapped walnut piece. And it's very deceiving because where it started was a blank that went up to this, just a vase form. And what I did to get rid of the crack that showed up was I took out my coping saw. I started cutting down like this, continued it to here, came up to here, and went back up to the original point of the rim. As I did that, I've now removed the crack. I didn't stop there. What I did next is I did some relief carving, and I relieved this, made it a different thickness. And doing that, it creates the illusion that that piece is actually wrapped together when it's not. I came back and put 3 splines across of a contrasting color. Now, this is my piece, so I'm going to criticize it a bit. There's some things about it as I look back are not as good as they could have been. First thing was the color of the splines. When without the finish, there was a good contrast between the, I think that's Babinga or Bloodwood, one of the two, against the walnut. But when the finish was applied, they came together. I'm going to show you a next slide that somebody has actually done it much better to get much more contrast. The other thing that's very noticeable on this slide, on this piece to me today, is right here. This is a basic woodturner mistake that should not have happened. Of course, that was a lot of years ago. I didn't pay sufficient attention to the sapwood and hardwood. That the eye is pulled off of the wrapped nature of the vase because I left that sapwood in it. I think it detracts from the overall piece. So sometimes you got to be able to get done and go back and look at your own pieces and say, yeah, this is how it could be better. Next one is a piece by Ed Stone. Ed sat through this demonstration down in Wilmington, the Wilmington area woodturners, and he went home and he had shish kebabs. And he's sitting out there at the grill looking at the shish kebab skewers and said, you know, I could skewer those cracks on that little box I made. So after dinner, he went out, the shop got to work, and this is what he did. He skewered his crack together. I think that's an intriguing approach. Sometimes it doesn't have to be fancy. It just has to be creative. Again, he used the color. He took a bamboo skewer and used some red acrylic paint on it, diluted red acrylic paint to set up a better contrast against the wood tones of the box. This is one of my pieces. This is about 18 inches tall. It is a branch, mind you, an 18-inch branch from a laurel oak that graced the streets of Wilmington and had to be removed. The trees were a couple hundred years old and they were starting to come down and damage cars. Nevertheless, this was a branch and had a secondary branch coming off up here. Now, all along, it was my plan to try to hollow that through that branch opening, which is what I did. Now, doing that, I knew what would happen. It would crack at the pith, which it did. After the piece had dried, brought it back out, finished the hollowing, finished the outside, then I addressed the crack radiating from the pith by bolting the piece together. And those are thread brass rod that extend all the way through the form. And then I used brass that I've simply formed to match up with the curve. Now that's the front of the piece. This is the back of the piece, and you can see it goes all the way through. Now this worked. That piece sold within 20 minutes of the first show it was in. All right, let's see what is next. This is Jerry Commode. A lot of good things going here on with Jerry's splicing technique. First thing is the color contrast are superb. So he's using a dark inlay or a dark spline in the bowl that contrasts very well with the natural color of the wood. Now, there's some similarities here to things at my pieces and some of the same concepts. What I mean by that is it's footed to bring it up into sight lines. The other thing that happens is the wall. You see that flat wall? So he's trying to make sure that people see the repair, because the repair adds pleasure, adds quality, adds artistic view to the overall piece. Just Jerry's an excellent, excellent turner and artist. This is a piece by Steve Clark. The key point here for me was Steve did a much better job in selecting contrasting colors as he repaired this wing bowl. Now, he went a little further in that he also raised it up into the viewer's eye with this base. See this base? Now, he replicated the color of his splines in his base, so it works really well. Now, I would also suggest that you pay attention to the thinness of that rim. Guys, I got to tell you, that's some excellent, excellent, very wonderful tool control to be able to get something that thin. Steve did just an excellent piece. This is one of my pieces, and now this is a test question. You know me, I like to throw things out there. You got to challenge you all. Now, what I'm going to ask you is, what is wrong with this piece? Take a minute, look closely at it, think about the techniques that I've talked about early on, and then look at those staples, those in-the-wall staples that cover the crack that happened in that blank as I charted to accentuate the grain. If you look closely, what you're going to see is two things. First of all, inconsistent length. That one's too long. And inconsistent spacing. I diminished the value of this piece because I got hurried and thought I could lay the thing out by eye. And I didn't care if the drill bit ran on me a little bit. So what I end up with is I diminished a very, very wonderful piece. That's live oak from down here, along with some compressed wood usage. The point of this is I took a piece, and because I did not do the beginning steps of layout and drilling properly on curved surfaces, it ended up not being perfect. It's less than perfect. Okay, Jim Waterbury. I love what Jim did. Jim's down Columbia, South Carolina, and he had a small cracked bowl or vase form, and those are some pretty massive cracks. And what he did here that is so right is he used a loud color in his lacing to grab your attention. So he's taken a piece of, in effect, piece that would have gone to the fireplace and made it into something that screams, take me home, I'm different. This is a neat knick-knack to have up on a shelf. You'll also notice that Jim's layout, the consistency of his holes are all nice and even though that is a curving crack. And that's where the layout is done correctly. That's that's the improvement that you get from it. This is one of my early pieces. This is a bowl form that uses the butterfly technique. Again, let's go back and pay attention to a couple of some very salient points. Again, what we're finding is, let's use red this time. We're finding that it's footed to raise it up. And you'll notice again that the bowl form brings the repair up into people's lines of sight so that it is very visible. Also, if you look closely, what you'll see is that's a smaller butterfly. That's a 0.7 inch butterfly. This is a 0.9. So diminishing the size of the butterflies as I went down the wall improved the repair. This is a technique that we did not get to, but this is the use of copper staples. Now, it's amazing. I have a book, Robin Wood on Wood, that traces wood turning in England over centuries. And in the early days, they used wood chalices because they didn't have ceramics. They didn't have, they didn't have the ability to use many things, but they had wood. And of course, wood cracks. You put the wine in it, it's wet, it changes it, and it cracked. So they very carefully, meticulously took silver and put silver plate across the crack. Now, this is like 1634. And it's just amazing. This is what Steve has done here is he's taken a crack and he's mended it with a copper plate. Very intriguing approach. Now, this is another one of those questions. What would you do? And I think we've covered this because one of you had a similar piece where really what you think is an inclusion in the bark is not an inclusion. What it is a trunk of a tree that's grown together and it looks like it's one piece, but it's not. Very dangerous turning. Best thing you could do there, in my opinion, is actually use that as two blanks and move on. So with that, I'd like to wrap this segment up by saying, look, the next slide is the one that's your piece. And if you've used some of these repair techniques, I love it. Send me a picture of it. If it's good enough, it's going to go into the slide presentation and other folks will see it also. With that, I'd like to say thank you all for the time this morning. All the best to you and stay safe out there, folks. Thank you and good night.